So I've talked about previously why I believe Paldea Evolved booster boxes to be one of the best booster boxes to buy in the Scarlet and Violet era, if not the best box to buy. But I further want to talk about that here today and talk about it in a little bit more detail. I've explained previously why, like there being a couple reasonings. One being it has one of the most iconic cards from this era, the Magikarp IR. It's not an SIR, but it's still a very iconic card. Also, Paldea Evolved is an older set. It's the second main set. So those are the two reasons why I really believe this to be uh, pretty much the best buy in the Scarlet and Violet era in terms of booster boxes, even though currently it is the most expensive booster box. In my opinion, it really shows some sort of similarities with Fusion Strike, which I wanted to show you guys here today. So let's just start. So first here, I want to talk about sort of like reprints and like age of sets. Sometimes things get confused, but the main thing is that when things go out of rotation, that's pretty much when you know sets really don't get reprinted because for the Pokemon Company, it really wouldn't make sense for them to reprint a set where it's not even in competitive format. So that's sort of like I guess pretty much when people say it's out of print, right? When it goes out of rotation. Now, some people use the time frame of like 2 years, which isn't really true if you look at how the rotation really works. I'm not really familiar with the whole competitive format, but I did a little bit of research, and here, Paldea Evolved, it's about to be 2 years old. So you can see here it released on June 9th of 2023. So just a couple of weeks and it'll be 2 years old, but it's still in competitive format. So it can still technically get reprinted. So you can see here, here's the release date. And just to show you guys the competitive format where it stands, it's letter G, which you can see. I just pulled up this card. You can see in the bottom left here it says G. And if you read on the Pokemon website, you can see that cards with the F regulation mark will no longer be legal for play in 2025, and this was effective in April 11th. So that means G and H are still in legal use. And I researched, I'm pretty sure the competitive format, the rotation and how they do those sorts of things, it's every year. So it should be like a whole nother year where this is still in competitive format. I believe that to be true. So it's technically then like about 3 years or a little bit, maybe a little bit less. It's like 2.5, 3 years it could be for it to go out of rotation. And then technically, I guess, out of print at that point. So Paldea Evolved technically could still get reprinted technically because it's still in rotation, but there's been arguments, and I think it's true that earlier sets are less likely to get reprinted. And honestly, if you look at Paldea Evolved booster boxes, these have gotten reprinted multiple times at this point, and every single reprint has done absolutely nothing to the price because they've been so minuscule. And I truly believe these earlier sets Pokemon is not really going to focus on, even if they do reprint this, which they've already done twice. So I really find it to be at this point pretty low possibility they reprint it again. But even if they do, I can't see them reprinting it to the point where prices dip a lot. Like I think that if they do reprint this, it'll probably be just like the past two times where they reprint it and the prices don't really drop at all because it's so small. That's probably, in my opinion, what would happen if they reprint it again. I don't think they would focus on Paldea Evolved, that set to reprint a ton of when obviously everybody's complaining about the newly released stuff. So I think Paldea Evolved is a pretty safe buy, even though it is the most expensive box. I think where it's at and all the other things they want to focus on right now, like reprinting, like all the new releases, I think by the time this gets out of rotation, like I guess next year, or whatever, I feel like I feel like really Paldea Evolved would have by then be way more expensive, and I just don't see reprints of any sort of Paldea Evolved really doing anything to the prices. So even if it is the most expensive box and it technically is still in rotation, so it could still technically get reprinted, I don't think it's that risky to buy. I think this is one of the safer ones, just for that reasoning of this, just them focusing on the newly released products to reprint. And I think Paldea Evolved, it's not that risky to buy, even though it technically still could get reprinted. But now I guess I want to talk about why I believe Paldea Evolved to be, other than obviously like I talked about the age and I guess the rotation thing, it shows a lot of signs of being like Fusion Strike. It's sort of acting in the same way where, Scarlet and Violet booster boxes, they're all going up now, right? A lot of the boxes are in the 220s. They're going to close to 250s. Some boxes are in the 250s, like Obsidian Flames. But this is the standout one. Now, this is the most expensive box. If you compare to like Sword and Shield, well, Evolving Skies was the most expensive box. I don't think this is like Evolving Skies. But in my opinion, it shows really close similarities to Fusion Strike. And I want to show you guys why. So you can see here, right now, the booster box is at $300. The next most expensive one is I think Obsidian Flames at $250 because Surging Sparks recently has gone down. So yeah, this is the most expensive by around $50. So not by I guess that is a decent margin, but it's nothing like crazy like Evolving Skies back then was like hundreds of dollars more expensive than everything else. But Paldea Evolved is like $50 more expensive than the next most expensive thing. But I want to show you guys here what I mean by I guess this being similar in terms of like I guess where it's at and how it's growing to Fusion Strike. So right now, Paldea Evolved booster boxes are $300, but at one point, these were around $90. And it was very similar to Fusion Strike, where at one point, these got to around like $80, $90, right? I don't know why here it says 65, it didn't get that low, but it got to around $80 to $90, right? Because they got reprinted, no one really cared for them. The exact same thing happened to Paldea Evolved. Now, I guess now talking about the growth and how I see it to be similar to Fusion Strike. So, like I said, they both got kind of reprinted. No one really cared about them in the beginning. Went to around $90, but the growth is mainly what I want to talk about here. Why I see this sort of being similar. So the starting point, around $89, both were similar, but Fusion Strike. If you guys remember, Fusion Strike, like late last year, Sword and Shield boxes had a boom, right? Just like we recently saw. And a lot of the boxes started around like 220, like Lost Origin, Chilling Reign, and Fusion Strike. They're around like 220, 240. Fusion Strike was like a little bit more than the other ones. Like I think Fusion Strike was like 240 while the other ones were like 220. When prices skyrocketed late last year, Fusion Strike boxes went to about $500, a little bit more. But Lost Origin, Chilling Reign, those hit just 400. But Fusion Strike went like another $100 more than those boxes. So it was already showing signs of being a little bit of an outlier compared to the other boxes. And obviously now, if you look at where Fusion Strike boxes are, they're like $800 compared to Lost Origin, which is like low 500s. Chilling Reigns like 400. So that sort of, I guess, little bit more of growth of Fusion Strike continued. And Paldea Evolved, since now, it is the most expensive box by like $50. In my opinion, it's showing similar movements and behaviors to Fusion Strike where it started and how its growth, it's a little bit of an outlier and it's a little bit more expensive than everything else. So I think this could be a similar situation where it grows like Fusion Strike, where it's always ahead of the other boxes and it turns out to be, crazy. Other boxes like Paradox, Temporal, in the low 200s, I think those will probably behave like Chilling Reign, Brilliant Stars, and Paldea Evolved will be like the Fusion Strike. That's just my opinion, just based on the growth I'm seeing here. And the card prices, they're very different. The top chases of like Fusion Strike and Paldea, they're very different for a few reasons. One being that chase card and magic card is an IR, which is not the most I guess most highest rarity compared to the Gengar, which is an alternate art, which is the most highest rarity. But other than that, I see the prices and the growth of the cards to be pretty similar as well. These started very low, like in the 50s. Now it's around $200. Gengar started around $100. Now it's 500. So I think just overall, looking at the growth of all these cards, booster box prices, it's showing very similar signs in my opinion. And the top chases for both of these are one of the most notable in each of the eras. Like when you think about Sword and Shield alternate arts, Gengar is one of the top ones you think about. And when you think about top chases in Scarlet and Violet, you think about Magikarp, because this is a really big one. Even though it is just an IR, this is a very big chase. Because other than this, obviously there's like the Surging Sparks Pikachu. I guess you could maybe say Lily's Clefairy. There's the Greninja. Am I missing anything? Paradox doesn't really have any standouts. So this Temporal doesn't really have any. I think that's about it. There's honestly, and I think that's one of the arguments some people make in Scarlet and Violet is that there's not that many huge chases, but Magikarp is definitely one of the big ones that people know about, and it's one of the most iconic ones. So hopefully, this sort of analysis of Paldea Evolved, I guess I explained it in a way that it sort of makes sense, where it shows, in my opinion, similar signs of growth to Fusion Strike, and even though you are paying anywhere from like $50 to $75 more compared to other boxes, compared to maybe like Paradox, Temporal, even Scarlet Violet Base or Obsidian. This showing just, in my opinion, outlier behavior and similar growth to Fusion Strike. $300 and paying that little bit of a premium to have a box, a set that is very, sought after. A lot of people like Paldea Evolved. It's a very, well liked set. In it to be one of the older sets, it's the second main set. It having a very lower chance of getting reprinted. I see Paldea Evolved being one of the best boxes to buy, even if you're paying a little bit more. For me, Paldea Evolved, it's hard to buy at this price because if you look at the growth, 3 months ago, it was in the low 200s. So you are paying a lot more, obviously, now. But if you widen the scope and look where this is probably going to be in a year or two, when it's actually officially out of print, and if this whole trend does continue, I really see Paldea Evolved being at similar levels to Fusion Strike comparatively to other sets in Scarlet and Violet. I feel like this is going to be the outlier. I'm not saying it's going to be Evolving Skies, but I think this will be one of the top boxes, and paying a little bit more now and having that sort of, I guess, assurance that it's not going to get reprinted to the ground, maybe like a newer set. I feel like it is the best buy right now. And I'm, looking into buying some more of these because, Fusion Strike was one of the boxes I never bought a lot of for some reason. And obviously looking at it now, I sort of wish I did. So Paldea Evolved, I don't have many of these. It's sort of a similar situation to Fusion where I literally didn't have many. And you know what? Even though I am paying a lot more than obviously, if I bought them a few months ago, I would have had to pay. I just think Paldea Evolved is going to be one of the standouts. Even, we have Destined Rivals. I think Paldea Evolved is going to be a very, really good hold in the next few years here. And I think buying at 300, although it is the most expensive box, I think it has good reasons to buy it over some other ones, even if you're paying more money. So that's all I want to say here. Hopefully, you guys followed through with my explanations. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree with me or not. Let me know why. And let me know if you guys have been picking any Paldea Evolved booster boxes at this price point. So that's all I want to say here. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.